Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back. If you missed it last week, we talked about choosing your tank, where you're going to put it, and the gear you might would need for it. This week, we're going to talk about planting, stocking, and maintaining your setup. And again, we're going way back. If you're someone who's never started a tank before, these episodes are for you. Hi, Shelby. How are you?
Oh, good. How are you? Sorry, I thought I was muted. I couldn't hear anything.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah, I can hear now.
Okay, good. I'm like, are you frozen? I couldn't tell. All right, so plants are, I don't think I want to start with plants. I think I want to start with the cycle. So I think if you're a newbie, the cycle is one of the things that can be the most perplexing. And we're going to be really simplified about this because we're planning on being a lot more technical and sciencey next week. But this is something that's really essential for beginners, and it's where a lot of beginners tend to hit failure. Simple breakdown: fish produce waste, like they're peeing and pooping in the water. That is ammonia. Bacteria convert ammonia to nitrite, and a different bacteria converts nitrite to nitrate. Both ammonia and nitrite are super, super dangerous for fish and can kill them in a matter of hours. Nitrate can kill a fish, but it's going to take a lot longer, and it's going to take a lot stronger of a nitrate dose. Fish can live in nitrate. Nitrate is the safe option between ammonia, nitrite, and nitrate. It typically takes, what's the fastest you've ever seen a tank cycle, Shelby?
Oh, the fastest I've seen, probably 2 weeks, but sometimes it's not safe still, and it doesn't have enough, it's not safe enough for certain species of fish, but most of the fish you would buy at a store, sometimes 2 weeks is okay.
Yeah, so I have in my notes typically somewhere between 3 and 6 weeks to cycle a tank naturally. Obviously, if you're using bottled bacteria, seeded media, or if you have some old rocks or something that you're putting in your tanks, it can happen faster. But the biggest thing that you need to know is that you really need to set your tank up and have it going before you start adding fish.
Yeah.
So, assuming that you're going to watch next week, if you don't know what this nitrogen cycle is, let's move forward. Let's talk about plants. Shelby, tell us about some plants that are easy for beginners.
So there is a ton of plants that could just be on any setup that you get from the store. A lot of times they come pre with a light, and that could just be basic LEDs. So Anubis, Java ferns, different types of sorry, crypts and like Sagittaria. All of those are really easy. They don't need much for them to grow, and they don't need much light. They could really grow in like almost no light, filtered some, through a window. Some of these can grow. It's really, really easy and makes it for a really good environment in that tank. It helps and soaks up some of that ammonia from your fish.
How do you go about planting aquarium plants? I know the first time I think I saw anybody plant them was Ashley Armandi, and I was just so incredibly impressed. I was like, ooh, I didn't know it was done this way. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it really depends on what you want to do, but most of the time it's like stems. You could use tweezers, and you kind of like put them in, and you go up in the weird motion that you do to get it to
We need to
stick
do a
in the
YouTube
soil.
short of how to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, we should do that for Aquashella. We should just like get everybody who's aquascaping to do it once on a video and just do like a bunch of them. I think that'd be really cool looking.
It would, yeah. Especially everyone has like their different styles. Now, most of the time I struggle with tweezers sometimes. I like to use my fingers because you're so naturally using your fingers and everything. So it's much easier to do. Because sometimes I'll just push it down, and then I'll use my little fingers and put the soil around the stem so it stays down. And there's different methods for each plant. Um, just there's so much planning that goes into it because you need to know where it grows, how tall it grows, things like that. And we've talked about this at previous live streams of like, the taller plants to the medium to the small, where to plant them, where they would do best in the tank. Anubis, different bulbitis and things like that can be attached to driftwood, rocks, and done with fishing line to there's cotton that like degrades over time. So once the plant starts to grow, it starts to deteriorate in the tank. So you don't see it anymore and it's naturally attached to the piece of wood. Moss is like the most popular for that. And you get like that really pretty, like the north side of the tree out in nature has all that moss that grows. So just simple things, super glue sometimes, or just shoving it into crevices. And that's the best way to do something like that.
Steven said that he's all fingers except in nano tanks where his fat hands will overflow the tank. That's a good time to use tweezers.
Yeah.
So how would someone find out this information about a plant? Like, honestly, at this point, I think you did this for me at, where were we? Global. I sent you a picture of a lizard. I was like, what kind of lizard is this? And you put it in like Chat GPT and found out what it is. Like, is that a good way to figure out what a plant would need? Or is there other places to figure out, one, what the plant is, and two, how it's going to grow?
There's a bunch of Facebook pages that are really good for like plants for beginners or plants aquascaping. Most people know about these. You can find YouTubers. You can find different avenues. It really depends on what you like. If you like to listen to someone, I would find a YouTuber that talks about aquatic plants. There's plenty of them. Stephen P is one of them. They do like every week. They do a live stream and they talk, and where you can go in, you can ask a question about those plants and get information about them. And I learn a lot from them in like light cycle, CO2, things like that.
Can people, are we allowed to put links in the chat? Could anybody put some links in the chat of places that they go to?
If they're a moderator, they should be able to.
Okay, so yeah. Probably not.
But Fish Fam link is where there's a lot of YouTubers, so it's fishfam.link. And it's got like a whole calendar of schedules of all these people. It's crazy. But there's just so much information. You can also Google. I use the little camera on the Google search is what I use the most of. But aquatic plants are still like one of those things that grown under different conditions, it looks really different. So you could get a lot of misinformation on Google because some of it straggly growth might look like a different plant, and it's not. It's just a poor quality of that plant. So you kind of have to have someone that specializes in plants to understand if that's grown under poor conditions, what it might look like, and go, oh, this is this, not this. So it's some of it can get complicated, but most of it's real simple, especially when you go to a store. They usually have the easy to grow plants available. It's very rare that they have the rare plants.
So a beginner, assuming that they don't know these differences, you said under different conditions. The first thing that pops to my mind is whether or not the plant has been grown in water or out of water, right?
Yeah.
So why might that make a difference?
That's a huge thing for people too, because a lot of people get the ones that are submerged or immersed growth, and they're
what does that mean? What does immersed versus?
So immersed is going to grow above water. Their roots are usually in water or submerged in a very wet soil. And then submerged is grown in a tank. And a lot of nurseries or a lot of places that you could just get from other places are immersed growth. That's why they'll look really beautiful, vibrant. If you see flowers on some of them, that's a big sign to tell that that is an immersed growth plant, because most of the time they do not flower. Besides certain, there's some crypts that do. A lot of the buses still flower.
I love how it's always like, oh, this doesn't happen, except always. Yeah. I was a science teacher before, and I used to always tell my students that you didn't understand a science rule until you knew what the exceptions were, because there's never no exceptions. There's always exceptions to the rule.
Yep. And they're so with that, if people don't know that it's immersed and they go to put it in, a lot of time there is natural melting. That's just the plant adjusting to the different
What does melting mean?
situation.
It's not like literally melting, right? It's dying.
Yes, dying, and it looks as if it's melting in the tank because it just kind of wilts away, and it's that weird effect in the tank. And people think they've killed their plant, which most of the time it's just adjusting to the new water parameters and the new conditions that you're growing it under. So they just go back, and then the new growth comes in. Well, a lot of people get upset, throw the plant away, and think that it's dead, but most of the time it's just regrowing from the roots. And it could be stressful. We do, a lot of people do educate, say, hey, this is an immersed growth plant. You're going to have some melting, trim this back. I usually tell people when I sell them, because we do sell some immersed growth, it grows faster out of the water because you have natural CO2. Most of them are grown outside with sunlight. So it's just easier for people to mass produce the plants that way so that you have more in the aquarium hobby. So a lot of people don't understand that, but
I've even
some
heard people recommend when you buy an immersed plant to just go ahead and cut the leaves off.
Yes, yeah, because usually what the plant will try to do is keep that plant alive, those leaves alive, and they'll use all of its nutrients to do so, and that could be a problem in the long run. So usually it's better to do that.
Kiki said that she just got some galaxy sand to do a reset. I'm excited to see that tank. Boosts and crypts are definitely some of my favorites other than moss. And epiphytes because they're so versatile.
Yeah, I love the galaxy sand. It's like one of my favorite black sands that are on the market right now. And boosts and crypts are definitely where it's at. They're very simple, very medium to slow growth kind of, they just look gorgeous.
Are those more expensive or?
The boost can be a little bit expensive. I would say it's a hit or miss. Sometimes I've gotten really good deals on boosts. Sometimes I spent a fortune on this little tiny, they don't grow very fast. It's the only downside to boosts.
That's why I asked, like, for corals,
mm-hmm.
the slow growing corals tend to be more expensive because it takes so much longer to grow. So that's why I was asking that. You said they tend to be slower growers. I'm like,
mm-hmm. Yeah, we have mosses that are the same way. And, rarities in the hobby, it's because they're such slow growers that you can't propagate them as fast. So they do become a little bit more expensive. Now, the only reason you get like a good deal on them is usually someone importing them and wild boost. But there's not much more of that going on. So it will be more expensive in the long run because there is not many people with them.
Yeah, and the reason why that also is a problem is because if someone has the option to choose a plant that's fast growing, then they have a quick turnaround and a quick income source. Something that's a slower grower, just for people watching, something that's a slower grower, it's going to require more fertilizer from the person because they keep it in the house longer, potentially more water because of replacing water from evaporation, more energy from lights. If you put any lights on top of it, a lot of times these things are grown outside, so that's not a problem. But if you have to start thinking about electricity costs, at least for coral, this is the reason why slow growers tend to cost more. The person growing it has a lot more wrapped up in the growing of it than they do the faster growers.
Yep.
Even if they're an easy plant, if they grow slowly, they might be a more expensive one.
Mm-hmm.
All right, what's our next topic?
That one is... So we were talking about the cycle already and the plants. So next would be obviously to add some livestock once that tank is cycled all the way. And anywhere from fish, shrimp to snails. Sometimes snails can be added in a little bit earlier. But I usually wait till the tank is cycled to add anything.
All right. So once your tank is cycled, what kind of maintenance are we having to do before we get to the animals?
So usually 10% water change is what you want to do weekly. You can do every 2 weeks a 20% water change. I would not recommend doing anything larger than that. There is some species, like more discus related, that sometimes people do larger water changes and do it more frequently, but most of the time you don't have to do that, and it's actually kind of bad for you to do that big of a water change. It could shock the fish. It's much better for you to do slower and more frequent and keep it on a steady regimen. That anything that's stable is much better for the environment itself.
So I know for me, whenever I start a new tank, I cycle it and then I like to do a water change before I put fish in to try and reduce some of the nitrates that may have built up in the while I was waiting for it to cycle. Though I think most of the fish that we're planning on talking about today can probably handle even being put in before the cycle's done, as long as you don't put in a ton. But a 10% water change is really like, how long do you think that normally takes you?
Oh, like for one little tank, probably like 5 minutes.
Yeah, so if we're talking about like a 10-gallon tank, like
Yeah,
literally,
it's not
if
gonna
you
take
take
long.
some out, fill up a pot or something with some water, put some dechlorinator in it, and dump it in, and it's pretty easy. All right, so back to the fish. Sorry. All right.
um, Easy fish are always going to be guppies or tetras, a single beta fish. Those things are super easy to take care of. I love them so much because they're so friendly of a fish. They, don't need much space. They very easy just to take care of one fish and worry about feeding one fish instead of several. Um, Easier to not overfeed one fish too. When you have a group, you're like, oh, well, I want to make sure all of them get food. Sometimes it could happen. um, and those are super easy. Shrimp is always going to be my answer for anyone that wants a very low maintenance tank that is super easy to maintain. It's They're just such a low waste, and they're so cute. They're a little community, and I like the snails to go with them, and they add a little extra personality to the tank too. And you can do crayfish as well. They're not as bad, but they do eat a little bit more. So shrimp are just much easier. I'm always gonna preach shrimp if you know what we do. Um,
Yeah, I know for me,
but
I have a fish that I've had for probably, I'm looking at it right now, probably 4 years, and I've never seen it eat food. Like when I put food in it, it has never once ate the food I put in there. So it's obviously eating something. And I think that's something people don't realize sometimes when they are watching their fish when they feed them is all the biofilm that exists in a tank, which shrimp really like too, right?
yeah.
So it's very easy to overfeed and cause the ammonia and nitrite and nitrate to all spike again. So
hmm
I like that recommendation of starting with just a few.
Yeah, I am big on the problem of overfeeding fish for sure. They always look hungry to me. They just, they that's what they do. They trick you. They come up to the tank. They're like, all right, time to eat again. Like they
Scamming
just
for
get in that
food.
routine. Yeah, and I'm like, you
It's
want
like a
food,
cat,
right?
right?
Yeah.
Don't believe him. I just fed him. He's not
Yeah.
starving.
I think it's funny because you see those big old cats and they're huge, and you feel bad for them because they're always whining like they're hungry, and it's like,
Yeah,
no, stop feeding them.
they're starving, right?
Yeah.
Um, what about some fish? Like, are there any fish you wouldn't? Like you would tell a beginner, don't do this fish.
Absolutely. There is several fish in the hobby that are at stores, pet stores in general, that are a no, please do not get this. Please do not put this in a 10-gallon tank. And that one is goldfish. You got koi fish, and you got black tip sharks, because like that one's a big one that people don't realize how massive those little tiny fish that you think are going to stay small because the pet store says that they're going to stay small, and they don't. They're huge. Do not put those in your tank. Those are not meant to go in tanks, and they produce so much waste that it can become a problem if you don't have Especially your first time, if you don't have a regiment and know how to do water changes, absolutely not a good go-to fish. And they're cute, they're very friendly, but goldfish need a lot of room because of the waste that they create, just like turtles. You would not put a turtle in a 10-gallon tank that lives on a river most of the time.
Yeah, and I think like the big thing there, like you made a point that I don't know that someone who starts out thinks about this. Like when you start a fish tank, you are automatically adding a thing to your work week. Like you have a habit that you have to form to do every week. So it's like this combination of like, even if you think you're going to do like maintenance on your tank every single week, forming that habit is hard. So like even
Yeah.
with the best intentions, it can be very difficult to be caring for a tank the way it needs. So when you start out, like give yourself some grace and plan for mistakes and forgetting about the fact that you have a new habit that you haven't actually formed yet.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of really gross fish that are going to build up ammonia very quickly. So even if you do have a nitrogen cycle, if you've cycled your tank, if you're providing more ammonia in the water than that bacteria can eat, so you're just causing a problem. Like you're going to kill everything.
Yeah.
I think that takes us to maintenance tips, unless there's other fish that you think are you wouldn't recommend to newbies.
Nope, that's pretty much an overall, because there's so many in those categories that would just work really well.
So I think this was a natural transition to maintenance tips. And
Mm-hmm.
I think earlier I got ahead of myself whenever I started talking about water changes also, because we're talking about that again.
Yeah.
All right, so habits. What are those habits that need to be done daily, weekly, monthly, even?
Yeah. So just making sure, there's a lot of evaporation that could go on. That's why you want to have a lid. So that is one of those things people don't think about when they're buying a tank, that could become like a
That
weekly
water dries
issue.
out?
Yeah. Yeah. It it's yeah, without that lid, it just starts to evaporate and then becomes an issue, because like now all of the water in there has so much minerals and so much buildup in it, that when you go to top off, a lot of people top off with their water because they're like, oh, it just needs more water. But that could do a lot of harm. And you don't want to just do that. You want to make sure you remove some of the water and then fill up when it's evaporating like that. And, that's something that will come naturally eventually, but sometimes people learn the hard way with that.
I think
There's other things like taking care of the plants. You don't want them to overgrow. If they're melting back, you want to take care of the issue, not have too much dying plants in there, because if you do and you don't have any proper cycle, it could become an issue for all the. It would be like a buildup of nitrates, I believe. I always get those two confused.
yeah. We have gonna go backwards, sorry.
Oh,
Amber
you're
Pepper has a hot take. Guppies. What do you think about not adding guppies to a tank?
to not adding guppies.
Yeah.
That's that's fine. Guppies, to each their own with the.
Amber, why are you saying not adding guppies? I'm curious. I know they reproduce like crazy, and if you're a new person and you're not expecting all the babies, that can be
Yeah.
quite overwhelming very quickly.
Yeah.
Back whenever I used to have reptiles, I would take the babies and put it in the water dish for my reptiles to eat the baby
Oh,
guppies.
that's funny. Yeah, I would say that a lot of people, they could have a problem with guppies because of them breeding too fast. That's why usually, with any species that you put in a tank, these are easy beginners, as long as you need to research your animals before you put them in. That's with anything,
Yeah.
any care that you do. It doesn't matter if it's reptile, bird, dog, cat, to fish, you need to have research and know about your animal before you purchase it, which obviously a lot of us don't do because you get so excited in the moment.
Yeah, they're
But
pretty.
hopefully we're hoping and you understand what you're getting yourself into. And guppies could overbreed if you have really good water parameters, and the best way is to take them back to a pet store or put them on marketplace. And if you don't want to do that, there's also put them outside for the birds to get in a little tiny pond, and they'll come and eat them.
My lizards used to enjoy chasing them down and eating them. So
that's crazy.
Your husband said stingrays. Do not get a stingray if you're new. Arapaima, Steven says, I think they started to have fun with different fish that you shouldn't start with. I feel like if you're in a store with these types of animals, you're not in PetSmart or Petco. And hopefully the people in those stores are going to be a little bit aware of how knowledgeable someone is and will give gentle suggestions on, hey, maybe you shouldn't put or maybe less than gentle suggestions. Maybe you shouldn't put this Arapaima in a 10-gallon tank. Hopefully they just won't sell it to you. All right, so Amber said she started with them and they're not as hardy as they used to be. She said she's had so many health issues with them. She loves them, but they are difficult for beginners, in her opinion.
Yeah, so to that point, it would probably, I don't know if you're getting them from a pet store or if you're getting them from a local breeder. That could cause a big difference. That's the same with the shrimp. So if you get them from a big box store, a lot of times they're imported. Imports can have a lot of health issues where you could go to your local club and be able to get a lot of good guppies. There are a lot of guppies that are interbred these days that could have some more issues like humpback and things like that. So I guess it would be hard for some people to have a good source for guppies. I've lucked out. We have incredible people in our club that have great guppies, and they are super hardy. I could throw them in just about everything. Whereas if we're talking on a scale from guppies to discus, I can keep guppies alive. Discus are not a good beginner. Like, it doesn't matter what, even a higher level fish, keeping is, some people struggle with discus to their water parameters, where guppies can take a big fluctuation. It's much easier. But some people have had the same issue with endlers. It doesn't work for their water, and that's what you have to kind of look for, is your water parameters, and make sure that that species is good for your water. And source does matter, and that's with anything. Just like a dog, there's mutts in the world that are overbred, that are unhealthy. You would have to be going to the vet several times a year. That's why you do your research and get the right animal, and it's going to be the same for everything that you ever do, from birds to cats to dogs to fish. The fish are the same way. If they're overbred, if they're interbred, if they're not being taken care of, if they're coming from imports, those likely do have diseases. And if you don't know how to take care of them, they could be a hard fish to take care of.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point also, is like, sometimes things just don't work for you. Like, I know there's certain plants that I just can't grow. Like, they're easy plants, like house plants, but they just don't grow for me. And other plants that I can grow like crazy that other people struggle with. And the same thing happens for me with coral. There's certain coral that I just struggle with. I don't know what it is, like, because technically my water's at the correct parameters. I've done all the testing that can be done. Like, it should be growing. It has the right light, the right flow, and they just don't grow for me. But then other corals that are supposedly really hard to grow like crazy for me. So I think sometimes it's just there's a factor involved that we can't pinpoint that is causing you to struggle. So it could be water or something else. Steven's dogs love water.
Yeah, I even say that she said something about how her local fish store didn't do great. Those also could be imports. Local stores still do imports as well. That's why we always talk about sources too, because like a lot of people in the shrimp community alone talk about how that they couldn't have shrimp survive, and it doesn't matter. They've gone to this store, to this store, to this store. I'm like, well, those are all imports. They're getting them very cheap. They're getting for pennies instead of a hobbyist that wants to sell it to you for $1 so that they can make more money. And it, from a business standpoint, it makes sense. But for health wise, it doesn't really help. So, mine might cost you $10 more, but in the long run, you have way healthier fish or shrimp, and they last a lot longer, and you enjoy the hobby, and you don't think that you're the cause. Like,
I'm going to
that's
disagree
the
with you.
problem.
I don't think it costs more if you buy more expensive fish. I think it costs more if you buy cheaper fish, because then you have to keep rebuying them, because inevitably they're going to be sick, they're going to die, you're not going to know what's wrong with them. Like, it's better to just buy once, cry once. Like, I think that actually, it might be more money up front, but I think it saves you money in the long run if you just get from a reputable source that might be slightly higher priced than a less reputable source.
Yeah, the initial cost would cost, and it's not even dramatically more. Sometimes we're, cheaper than, you'd get at a store, because the store has to make money. So some hobbyists will be like right in between, and it,
and they have
help
overheads. It's not just that they have to make money; they have bills they have to pay, right?
Yeah.
The hobbyist might not be as strongly connected to this being a source of paying bills.
Mm-hmm.
So we're supposed to talk about maintenance also, but I think maybe we should save it for next week. I think that we could make maintenance an entire episode and then do the nitrogen cycle the following week, or even connect it together, because sometimes your maintenance routine could impact your cycle.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to do it.
All right, so next week we're doing beginner-friendly topics again. Please make sure you share this with your friends that might be new or old, maybe add some insight to the conversation like was done here. I think that the conversation around guppies provided some really interesting rabbit trails for us to talk about. And I am going to cut us off because we're at 30 minutes. Try and keep it short and sweet for you guys so that y'all can be done with your lunch break and move on about your day. Anything else you want to add today, Shelby?
No, just make sure if you have any comments, post them down below if I could just get the words out. And thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you guys, and we will see you later. Swim with Pisces.